Hi everyone, my name is Melike. Today we have a topic and this topic is called as a analyzing arguments. Firstly, we will look at diagramming short arguments. Diagramming is a quick and easy way to analyze relatively short arguments. Now, please let me write an example for you and you'll understand better. This is our example. Let me read it for you. The death penalty should be abolished because it is racially discriminatory. There is no evidence that it is a more effective deterrent than life imprisonment, and innocent people may be executed by mistake. Firstly, read through the argument and circle any premise or conclusion indicators. Here we have because, and this is our indicators. And then number the statements consecutively as they appear in the argument. This is the first sentence. And after the because, this is our second sentence. And there is no evidence is our third sentence. And lastly, we have innocent people may be executed by mistake. This is our fourth sentence. Then arrange numbers on a page with premises placed above the conclusions they are claimed to support, like that. Thirdly, omit any logically irrelevant statements. That is a statement that don't function as either premises or conclusions in the argument. Here. And they support the one independently. Okay, now we have first independent support and secondly linked support. Here in the independent support, two premises are independent when neither premise would provide less support for the conclusion if the other premise were omitted. For example, here 1, 2, and they support 3 independently. And in the linked support, two premises are linked when the omission of one of the premises would cancel or reduce the amount of support provided by other. For example, 1 and 2 together support 3. This is linked. And thirdly, two premises are independent if neither premise would lose any power to support the conclusion if the other premise were removed. For example, first sentence, Agatha is a mother, and then Agatha is a noun, and therefore Agatha is a female. Now, let's look at the tips on diagramming arguments. Here we have, as a total, we have 7 tips. First one is find the main conclusion first. Secondly, pay close attention to premise and conclusion indicators. Thirdly, remember that the sentences containing the word often contain 2 or more separate statements. For example, never fly, paddle, car, airliness. They are never on time, and the food tastes like warmth or cardboard. The fourth one is treat conditional statements and disjunctive statements as a single statement. The fifth one is don't number or diagram any sentence that is not a statement. The sixth one is don't diagram irrelevant statements. And the last one is don't diagram redundant statements. Now let's look at the summarizing longer arguments. The goal of an argument summary is to provide a synopsis of the argument that accurately restates the main points in the summarizer's own words. We introduce a method for summarizing longer arguments called standardization. Now let's look at the paraphrasing. The purpose of an argument summary is to clarify any argument structure by restating its main points as briefly, clearly, and accurately as possible. A paraphrase is a detailed restatement of a passage using different words and phrases. A good paraphrase is firstly accurate. The first virtue of a good paraphrase is that it's accurate. An accurate paraphrase is faithful to an author's intended meaning. It reproduces that meaning fairly and without bias or distortion. And secondly, a good paraphrase is clear. A good paraphrase is clear. Arguments are often expressed in a language that is needlessly wordy or confusing. And a good paraphrase is concise. Here, a good summary captures the essence of an argument. It strips away all the irrelevant and unimportant details and puts the key points of an argument in a nutshell. And lastly, a good paraphrase is charitable. It is often possible to interpret a passage in more than one way. In such cases, the principle of charity requires that we interpret the passage as charitably as the evidence reasonably permits. Now, let's talk about finding missing premises and conclusions. In real life, people often leave part of their argument unstated. Sometimes a premise is left unstated. For example, a store clerk says that, "I'm sorry, I can't sell any beer. You are under 21. Here, implied here is the premise, I can sell beer to anyone under 21. Okay? In other cases, a conclusion is left unstated. For example, the bigger the burger, the better the burger. Burgers are bigger at Burger King. Here, implied is the conclusion, burgers are better at Burger King. An argument with a missing premise or conclusion is called antinomy. There are two basic rules in filling in missing steps in here. The first one is faithfully interpret the arguer's intentions. Here, the most important rule in filling in missing premises and conclusions is to be as accurate as possible in interpreting as arguer's intent. Secondly, be charitable. Here, sometimes it's difficult or impossible to know what unstated premise or conclusion an arguer had implicitly in mind. In such cases, the principle of charity requires that we interpret the argument as generously as possible. Now let's look at the summarizing extended arguments. Now that we have learned how to paraphrase passages and fill in the missing premises and conclusions, it's time to introduce our method for summarizing longer arguments. The method is called as a standardization because it consists of restating an argument in a standard logical form. An argument is said to be in standard logical form, when each step in the argument is numbered consecutively. Premises are stated above the conclusions they are claimed to support, and justifications are provided for each conclusion in the argument. The following list shows the steps in the argument standardization. Yes, let's look at it.
Başım.
How to standard and extended argument. First one. Read through the argument carefully and try to identify its main conclusion. Secondly, omit any unnecessary or irrelevant material. Third one is number the steps in the argument and stack them in incorrect logical order. Then fill in any key premises or conclusion. And lastly, add parenthetical justifications. For each conclusion in the argument. Now let's look at the common mistakes to avoid in standardizing arguments. It takes practice to become good at standardizing arguments. Here are some common mistakes to watch out for. Firstly, don't write incomplete sentence. For example 1. Because animals can experience pain and suffering, therefore it's wrong to kill or mistreat animals. Here, line 1 is a sentence fragment, not a complete sentence. Because arguments are completed entirely of statements, only complete sentences should be included in argument standardization. In this argument, the standardization can be repaired simply by deleting the word because in the first line. The correct version is animals can experience pain and suffering, therefore it's wrong to kill or mistreat animals. Secondly, don't include don't include more than one statement per line. For example, the president should resign since he no longer enjoys the confidence of the board of trustees. This is incorrect. And thirdly, don't include anything that is not a statement. And lastly, don't include anything that is not a premise or conclusion. Not a premise or conclusion. For example, many people today argue that capital punishment is morally wrong. This is incorrect. But the God book says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. What the God book says is true, therefore, a capital punishment is not morally wrong. It was the end of my presentation, and today we learned that how to analyze an argument. And thank you for listening to me.